Hi and welcome back again. In this video, we'll be looking at words having to do with time. There are two nouns for time in general. One is ha kairos, and this means time, but not just clock time. This is a time or a season, an occasion or an opportunity for something. It's a special time or time in the sense of the appropriate time for something to happen, or an opportune time for something to happen. The other word for regular clock time is hakronos. Specific periods of time begin with hehora, the feminine noun meaning hour, but also metaphorically a moment or a point in time. The hour was the only, or the smallest unit of time that most people were aware of in their daily lives in the ancient world. They didn't have clocks or watches that would keep more accurate time than that. And so an hour was the natural unit to use to talk metaphorically of any particular point in time. Etos, on the other hand, is a year. And this is a third declension noun of the genos type. So the genitive singular is etus, and the nominative and accusative plural are ete instead of eta. Hehemera is a day. And there's a related adverb, semeron, which means today. On the other hand, henux is night. And this is a third declension noun of the pais type. So the genitive singular is nuktos, and the dative plural is nuxi. The real stem here is nukt. So you might not get that from the nominative singular form unless you think of nux as ending not with a xi, but with a kappa sigma. So that's where we get the nuk root, and like with pais, the sigma, once we take it out of the xi, so to speak, and are left with nuk, the sigma, it turns out, covered up another consonant, and in this case that was a tau. So the real stem of nux is nukt, ending with a tau, which is where we get the genitive singular nuktos. And we point out the dative plural nuxi just because there's some reversion that happens here. When nukt runs into the ending si for the dative plural, that tau essentially drops out, and the kappa and sigma contract together to form the xi again. So nuxi, the dative plural, actually looks a lot more like henux, the nominative singular. Aside from that form, though, the rest of them are quite regular, using the nukt stem. So how do we talk about when, the time when something happens? We can begin with the adverb hota, which means when, or the near synonym adverb hotan, which also means when in general. Now, often with adverbs, if we add a p on the beginning, that makes it interrogative. So instead of hota, we can say pota, and that means when, in a question. Or it can mean ever, or sometime. Tauta, on the other hand, means then, at that time. And this follows another pattern where often, instead of adding a p on the beginning of an adverb, we can add a tau on the beginning of an adverb, and that makes it more definite. It's not just when, it's then, at that time. We can also add other words on the beginning of adverbs, like pan, meaning all or each or every. And so pan tauta means always or at any time. We can ask when questions then with pata like this. Pata elthas pale. That's asking when, pata, did you come into the city? There are several other adverbs that have to do with time. Un means then, in the sense of at that time. And it can also mean next, subsequently. Euthus means right away or quickly. This is actually an adjective, but when it's being used in an adverbial sense like this to mean quickly, then it's indeclinable. You don't have to put different endings on it. The other adverb form that's related to it is eutheos, which really means the same thing, right away, immediately. Palin means again, or back, or backwards. Arti means now, at this moment, and nun really is synonymous with arti, and it also means now. The adverb ede means already. Upo is kind of the opposite. It means not yet. Eti means yet or still. And from eti we have two derived negative forms with either u or me, the two negative particles, stuck in front. So we have uketi, which means no longer or never, and meketi, which also means no longer or never. And epe means since. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that euthus can also be used as an adjective. In fact, it really is an adjective. And as an adjective, it's a little bit unusual in that it uses the third declension endings for the masculine and neuter forms, but the first declension ending for the feminine. So we can refer to this as a 3-1-3 adjective. Third declension, first declension, third declension. The real stem in the masculine and neuter is euthe, and it's declined like a polis type in the masculine, or a genos type in the neuter. The confusing part here is that there's a thematic upsilon that shows up in several of the singular forms of the masculine and neuter. So the stem in those forms looks more like it's euthu instead of euthe. So the nominative masculine singular is a bit irregular. It's euthus. The genitive is what we would expect with a polis type or a genos type. It's euthus with an omicron upsilon. And if the stem is euthe, then we would expect the dative form euthe. The accusative, though, brings the upsilon back to the end of the stem, and instead of euthin, it becomes euthun, and the vocative becomes euthu. In the neuter, similarly, the neuter nominative singular is just euthu. The genitive is euthus, as expected. The dative is euthe, as expected. But the accusative is the same as the nominative singular, and it's just euthu, as is the vocative, euthu. Really, the only forms you have to be careful to remember here are the neuter nominative singular and the masculine nominative and accusative singular. Because if you remember the neuter nominative singular, all you have to do is remember that the accusative and the vocative are the same. So euthu, euthu, and euthu. In the plural, though, the masculine and neuter forms decline just like typical polis or genos type third declension nouns. The feminine, on the other hand, is a very regular first declension adjective, uses alpha class first declension endings all throughout. The only thing to remember there is that there's this sort of extension on the stem. So instead of just eutha, we have eutheia, and the genitive eutheias, and the dative eutheia, etc. But aside from that, the feminine forms are very regular first declension. One other thing to mention when we're talking about time is a use of the genitive case that we call the genitive of time. Sometimes a genitive noun gives the period of time when something happens. And in this case, it can modify actually a verb or an action noun, and it's often translated with during or maybe when. In Luke 18:12, for example, we read, Ne stuo dis tu sabbatu. That means I usually fast, ne stuo, twice, dis, tu sabbatu, during the Sabbath. And notice here again that the genitive, tu sabbatu, modifies the verb ne stuo. It's not modifying a nominal as with most genitives. So you can tuck this away as another use of the genitive to go along with all of the other kinds of relationship that the genitive usually indicates between a nominal and another nominal.